Hi guys, so ready for this instalment of the BFG today. Got myself from some Frobscottle. So let's pop it open. There we go. If I start whiz popping and I fly up into the air, I'm really sorry. So just listen out for that, okay? Wow, it's delicious. Wow, it is just like vanilla and cream with a hint of raspberry. Okay, so today we're going to be looking at Dream Country. So we're going to look at how the bottles of dreams are filled. Let's go and see what happens. Journey to Dream Country. After the mad Frobscottle party was over, Sophie settled herself again on the top of the enormous table. "You's feeling better now?" asked the big friendly giant. "Oh, much better, thank you," Sophie said. "Whenever I is feeling a bit scrutty," the BFG said, "a few gallops of Frobscottle is always making me hopscotchy again." "I must say, it's quite an experience," Sophie said. "It's a rat twizzler," the BFG said. "It's gloriumptious." He turned away and strode across the cave and picked up his dream-catching net. "I was galloping off now," he said, "to catch some more whoopsie-whiffing dreams for my collection. I was doing this every day without missing. Is you wishing to come with me?" "Oh, not me, thank you very much. Not with those other giants lurking outside." "I was snugging you very cosy into the pocket of my waistcoat," the BFG said, "and no one is seeing you." Before Sophie could protest, he had picked her up off the table and popped her into the waistcoat pocket. There was plenty of room in there. "Is you wishing for a little hole to peep out from?" he asked her. "There's one here already," she said. She found a small hole in the pocket. When she put one eye close to it, she could see out very well indeed. She watched the BFG as he bent down and filled his suitcase with empty glass jars. He closed the lid, picked up the suitcase in one hand and took the pole with the net on the end in the other hand and marched towards the entrance of the cave. As soon as he was outside, the BFG set off across the great hot yellow wasteland where the blue rocks lay and the dead trees stood, and there all the other giants were skulking about. Sophie, squatting low on her heels in the pocket of her leather waistcoat, had one eye glued to the little hole. She saw the group of enormous giants about 300 yards away. "Hold your breaths," the BFG whispered down to her. "Cross your fingers. Here we go." He was going right past all these other giants. "Is you seeing that whooping great one there, the one nearest to us?" "I see him," Sophie whispered back, quivering. "That's the horriblest of them all and the biggest of them all. He is called the flesh lump-eating giant." "I don't want to hear about him," Sophie said. "He is 54 feet high," the BFG said softly as he jogged along, "and he is swallowing human beings like they're sugar lumps, 2 or 3 at a time." "You're making me nervous," Sophie said. "I was nervous myself," the BFG whispered. "I always get as jumpy as a jog hogger when the flesh lumping eating giant is around." "Keep away from him," Sophie pleaded. "Not possible. He is galloping easily 2 times as quickly as me." "Should we turn back?" Sophie said. "Turning back is worse," the BFG said. "If they sees me running away, they're all giving chase and throwing rocks." "They would never eat you, though, would they?" Sophie asked. "Giants is never guzzling other giants. There's fighting and squaring a lot with each other, but never guzzling. Human beings is more tasty to them." The giants had already spotted the BFG, and all heads were turned. They watched him as he jogged forward. He was aiming to pass well to the right of the group. Through her little peephole, Sophie saw the flesh lump-eating giant moving over to intercept them. He didn't hurry. He just loped over casually to a point where the BFG would have to pass. The others loped after him. Sophie counted 9 of them altogether, and she recognised the blood bottler in the middle of them. They were bored. They had nothing to do until nightfall. There was an air of menace about them, and they loped slowly across the plain with long lolloping strides, heading for the BFG. "Here comes the runty one," boomed the flesh lump eater. "Ho, ho there, runty one. Where is you splashwinkling away in such a hefty hurry?" He shot out an enormous arm and grabbed the BFG by the hair. The BFG didn't struggle. He simply stood and stopped quite still and said, "Be so kind as to be letting go of my hair, flesh lump eater." The flesh lump eater released him and stepped back a pace. The other giants stood around waiting for the fun to start. Now then, you little grub squiffler, boomed the flesh lump eater. We is all of us wanting to know where you is galloping off to every day in the daytime. Nobody ought to be galloping off to anywhere until it's getting dark. The human beings could easily be spotting you and starting a giant hunt, and we is not wanting that to happen, is we? We is not, shouted the other giants. Go back to your cave, runty one. He's not galloping to any human being country, the BFG said. I is going to other places. I is thinking, said the flush lump eater, that you is catching human beings and keeping them as pets. Right you is, cried the blood bottler. Just now I was hearing him chittering away to one of them in his cave. You was welcome to go and search my cave from frack to bunt, the BFG answered. You can go looking into every crook and cranny. There's no human beans or stringy beans or runny beans or jelly beans or any other beans in there. Sophie crouched still as a mouse inside the BFG's pocket. She hardly dared breathe. She was terrified she might sneeze. The slightest sound or movement would give her away. Through the tiny peephole, she watched the giants clustering around the poor BFG. How revolting they were. All of them had piggy little eyes and enormous mouths with thick sausage lips. When the flesh lump eater was speaking, she caught a glimpse of his tongue. It was jet black, like a slab of black steak. Every one of them was more than twice as tall as the BFG. Suddenly, the flesh lump eater shot out two enormous hands and grabbed the BFG round the waist. He tossed him high in the air and shouted, Catch him, man-hugger! The man-hugger caught him, and the other giants spread out quickly in a large circle, each giant about 20 yards from his neighbour, preparing for the game they were about to play. Now the man-hugger threw the BFG high and far, shouting, Catch him, bone cruncher! The bone cruncher ran forward and caught the tumbling BFG and immediately swung him up again. Catch him, chow chewer! He shouted. So it went on. The giants were playing ball with the BFG, vying with each other to see who could throw him the highest. Sophie dug her nails into the sides of the pocket, trying to prevent herself from tumbling out when she was upside down. She felt as though she was in a barrel going over Niagara Falls. And all the time there was a fearful danger that one of the giants would fail to catch the BFG and he would go crashing to the ground. Catch him, meat dripper! Catch him, gizzard gobbler! Catch him, mead musher! Catch him, blood bottler! Catch him, catch him, catch him! In the end, they got bored with the game. They dumped the poor BFG on the ground. He was dazed and shattered. They gave him a few kicks and shouted, Run, you little runt! Let us be seeing how fast he was galloping. The BFG ran. What else could he do? The giants picked up rocks and hurled them after him. He managed to dodge them. Run, you little runt! They shouted. Troggy little twit, shivery little shrimp, mucky little midget, squaggly little squib, grobbly little grub. At last, the BFG got clear of them all, and in another couple of minutes, the pack of giants was out of sight over the horizon. Sophie popped her head up from the pocket. Oh, I didn't like that, she said. Phew, said the BFG, few and far between. They was in a nasty, crotchety mood today, they was not. I was sorry he's having such a real gig time. No worse than you, Sophie said. Would they ever really hurt you? I isn't ever trusting them, said the BFG. How do they actually catch the humans they eat? Sophie asked. There's usually just sticking an arm through the bedroom window and snitching them from their beds, the BFG said. Like you did to me. Ah, but I isn't eating you, the BFG said. How else do they catch them? Sometimes they is swimming in from the sea like fishies with only their heads showing above the water. And then out comes a big hairy hand and grabs someone off the beach. Children as well. Often chidlers, the BFG said. Little chidlers who is building sandcastles on the beach, that's who the swimming ones are after. Little chidlers is not so tough to eat as old grandmama. So says the children giant. As they talked, the BFG was galloping fast over land. Sophie was standing right up in his waistcoat pocket now and holding on to the edge with both hands. Her head and shoulders were open and the wind was blowing in her hair. How else do they catch people, she asked. All of them is having their own special way of catching the human being, the BFG said. The meat-driven giant is preferring to pretend he's a big tree growing in the park. He's standing in the park in a dusky evening and he's holding great big branches over his head. And there is he waiting until some happy families are coming to have a picnic under the spreading tree. The meat-dripping giant is watching them as they lay out their little picnic. But in the end, it's the meat dripper who's having a picnic. Isn't it too awful? Sophie cried. The gizzard gubbler giant is a city lover, the BFG went on. The gizzard gubbler is lying high up between the roofs of houses in the big cities. He's lying there snugly as a sniggler and watching the human beings walking on the street below. And when he sees one that he likes the look of, he has a whoopsie good flavour, he grabs it. He sees it reach it down and snitching it off the street like a monkey taking a nut. He says it's nice to be able to pick and choose what you is having for supper. He says it's like choosing from a menu. And people see him doing it. Never as they seeing him. Do not forget it's dusty dark at this time. Also, the gizzard gobbler has a very fast arm. His arm is going up and down quicker than Squinker's. But if all these people are disappearing every night, surely there's some sort of outcry, Sophie said. The world is a whopping big place, the BFG said. It has 100 different countries. The giants is clever. They is very careful not skidding off to some country too often. There's always squid fizzling around. Even so, Sophie said. Do not forget, the BFG said. The human beings are disappearing everywhere all the time, and even without the giants is guzzling them up. Human beings is killing each other much quicker than the giants are doing it. But they don't eat each other, Sophie said. Giants isn't eating each other either, nor is giants killing each other. Giants is not very lovely, but they is not killing each other. Nor is crocodile diddlies killing other crocodile dillies, nor is pussycats killing pussycats. They kill mice, Sophie said. But they is not killing their own kind, the BFG said. Human beings is the only animals that is killing their own kind. Don't poisonous snakes kill each other? Even poisonous snakes is never killing each other, the BFG said. Nor is the most fearsome creatures like tigers and rhinoceroses. None of them is ever killing their own kind. Has you ever thought about that? Sophie kept silent. I was not understanding human beings at all, the BFG said. You is a human being, and you are saying it is grisling and origus for giants to be eating human beings, right or left? Right, Sophie said. But human beings are squishing each other all the time. They're shooting guns and going up in aeroplanes to drop bombs on each other's heads every week. Human beings is always killing other human beings. He was right, of course. He was right, and Sophie knew it. She was beginning to wonder whether human beings were actually any better than giants. Even so, she said, defending her own race, I think it's rotten that these foul giants should go off every night to eat humans. Humans have never done any harm to them. That is what the little piggy wig is saying every day, the BFG answered. He is saying, I have never done any harm to any human being, so why should he be eating me? Oh dear, Sophie said. The human beings is making rules to suit themselves, the BFG went on. But the rules they is making do not suit the little piggy wiggies. Am I right or left? Right, Sophie said. Giants is also making rules. Their rules is not suiting the human beings. Everybody's making his own rules to suit himself. But you don't like that these beastly giants eating humans every night, do you? Sophie asked. I do not, the BFG answered firmly. One right is not making two less. You was quite cosy down there in my pocket. I'm fine, Sophie said. Then suddenly, once again, the BFG went into that magical top gear of his. He began hurtling forward with phenomenal leaps. His speed was unbelievable. The landscape became blurred, and again, Sophie had to duck down out of the whistling gale to save her head from being blown off her shoulders. She crouched in the pocket and listened to the wind screaming past. It came knifing in through the tiny peephole in the pocket and whooshed around her like a hurricane. But this time, the BFG didn't stay in the top gear long. It seemed as though he had some barrier to cross. A vast mountain, perhaps, or an ocean, or a great desert. But having crossed it, he once again slowed down to his normal gallop, and Sophie was able to pop her head up and look out once more at the view. She noticed immediately that they were now in an altogether paler country. The sun had disappeared above a film of vapour. The air was becoming cooler every minute. The land was flat and treeless, and there seemed to be no colour at all. Every minute the mist became thicker, the air became colder still, and everything became paler and paler until soon there was nothing but grey and white all around them. They were in a country of swirling mists and ghostly vapours. There was some sort of grass underfoot, but it was not green. It was ashy grey. There was no sign of a living creature and no sound at all except for the soft thud of the BFG's footsteps as he hurtled through the fog. Suddenly he stopped. We is here at last, he announced. He bent down and lifted Sophie from his pocket and put her on the ground. She was still in her nightie and her feet were bare. She shivered and stared around her at the swirling mists and ghostly vapours. Where are we? She asked. We is in dream country, the BFG said. This is where all dreams is beginning. Wow. We've met all the other giants, and they seem just as horrible as all the others, don't they? Oh, I'm just going to have a bit more propscuttle. Oh, it's making my tummy all fizzly. Okay, now we're going to read the final chapter for the week, Dream Catching. The big, friendly giant put the suitcase on the ground. He bent down low so that his enormous face was close to Sophie's. From now on, we is keeping as still as winky little mices, he whispered. Sophie nodded. The misty vapour swirled around her and made her cheeks damp and left dewdrops in her hair. The BFG opened the suitcase and took out several empty jars. He set them ready on the ground with their screw tops removed. Then he stood up very straight. His head was now high up in the swirling mist, and it kept disappearing, then reappearing. He was holding the long net in his right hand. Sophie, staring upwards, saw through the mist that his colossal ears were beginning to swivel out from his head. They began waving gently to and fro. Suddenly the BFG pounced. He leapt high in the air and swung through the net, through the mist, with a great swishing sweep of his arm. Got him, he cried. A jar, quick, quick, quick! Sophie picked up a jar and held it up to him. He grabbed hold of it. He lowered the net very carefully. He tipped something absolutely invisible from the net into the jar. He dropped the net and swiftly clapped one hand over the jar top. The top, he whispered. The jar top, quickly! Sophie picked up the screw top and handed it to him. He screwed it on tight and the jar was closed. The BFG was excited. He held the jar close to one ear and listened carefully. Oh, it's a wink squiffler, he whispered with a thrill in his voice. It's even better. It's a fizz wizard. It's a golden fizz wizard. Sophie stared at him. Oh my, he said, holding the jar in front of him. This will be giving some very little toddler a very happy night when I was blowing it in. Is it really a good one? Sophie asked. Good one, he cried. It's a golden fizz wizard. It's not often I was getting one of these. He handed the jar to Sophie and said, please be a starfish now. I was thinking there may be a whole swarm of fizz wizards up here today. And do kindly stop breathing. You are terribly noisy down there. I haven't moved a muscle, Sophie said. Then don't, the BFG answered sharply. Once again, he stood up tall in the mist, holding his net at the ready. Then came the long silence, the waiting, the listening, and at last, with surprising suddenness, came the leap and the swish of the net. Another jar! He cried. Quick, quick, quick! When the second dream was safely in the jar, the top was screwed down. The BFG held it to his ear. Oh no! Oh, mince my maggots! Oh, swipe my swoggles! What's the matter? It's a troggle humper! He shouted. His voice was filled with fury and anguish. Oh, save our solos! He cried. Deliver us from weasels! The devil is dancing on my dibbler! What are you talking about? The BFG was getting more distressed every moment. And here he is, catching his dreams. Oh, bash my eye bones! He cried, waving the jar in the air. I come all this way to get a lovely golden dreams, and what is I catching? What are you catching? I was catching a frightsome troggle humper, he cried. This is a bad dream. It is worse than a bad dream. It's a nightmare. Oh, no, said Sophie. What will you do with that? Oh, he's never letting it go, BFG cried. If I do, then some poor little toddler will be having the most curb-bloodling time. This one is a real kicksy bog thumper. I was exploding it as soon as I get home. Nightmares are horrible, Sophie said. I had one once and I woke up sweating all over. With this one, you would be waking up screaming all over, the BFG said. This one would make your teeth stand on end. If this one got into you, your blood would be freezing to icicles and your skin would go creeping across the floor. Is it as bad as that? It's worse, cried the BFG. This is a real whoopsie god switcher. You said it was a troggle humper, Sophie told him. It is a troggle humper, cried the exasperated BFG. But it's also a bog thumper and a gob switcher. It is all three riddled into one. Oh, I am so glad I was clutching it tight. Oh, you wicked beastly you, he cried, holding up the jar and staring into it. Nevermore is you going to be debunkling the poor human beanie toddlers. Sophie, who was also staring in the glass jar, cried out, I can't see it. There's something in there? Of course there's something in there, the BFG said. You was looking at a frightsome troggle humper. But he told me dreams were invisible. They're always invisible until they is captured. After that, they is losing a little of their invisibility. We is seeing one very clearly. Inside the jar, Sophie could see the faint scarlet outline of something that looked like a mixture between a blob of gas and a blob of jelly. It was moving violently, thrashing against the sides of the jar and forever changing its shape. Here's Sophie having a look. It's wriggling all over the place, Sophie cried. It's fighting to get out. It'll bash itself to bits. The nastier the dream, the angrier it is getting when it's not in prison, the BFG said. It is the same as with wild animals. If an animal is very fierce and he's put in a cage, it will make a tremendous rumpeldumpus. If it is a nice animal like a cockatoo or a fog-rump, it will sit quietly. Dreams is exactly the same. This one is a nasty, fierce, bog-trotting nightmare. Just look at him splashing himself against the glass. It's quite frightening, Sophie cried. I would be hating to get this one inside me on a darksome night, the BFG said. So would I, Sophie said. The BFG started putting the bottles back into the suitcase. Is that all? Sophie asked. Are we going? I is so upset by this troggle-humping, bog-funking grob switcher that I is not wishing to go on during catching is finished for today. Soon, Sophie was back in the waistcoat pocket, and the BFG was racing home as fast as he could go. When at last they emerged out of the mist and came again into the hot yellow wasteland, all the giants were sprawled out on the ground, asleep. Wow. Now that was 2 quite long chapters, so well done for using your amazing focus sapphire power and for being engaged with the BFG. Have a think what you believe will happen next. So what is the BFG going to do with that nightmare? Oh, I'm just going to have a little bit more of my frog scuttle. I'm going to have to go because I don't want to be awfully rude because I can feel something is about to pop. Okay, guys. Speak to you soon.